Greetings, you've landed at the VUC, IP Communications and VoIP community. We would like to thank Simwood.com for their support. Simwood can turn you as a developer into a telco. Our hosted PBX is from OnSIP.com, and you can go to GetOnSIP.com for a URL people can click to call you. We've been privileged over the last 5 years to be using the best conference bridge on the planet. Yes, I'm talking about ZipDX.com, full color, full featured, full HD conference bridge. Our website, vuc.me on the webs, hosted by Bluehost.com. And our worldwide local rate dial-ins are from Voxbone.com. Thank you, Michael. This is VUC 554, August 14th, 2015. Clarify.io is what we're going to be talking about with Keith Casey. Keith, first of all, hello and welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
I just wanted to ask you a quick question. You, on Twitter, it's D. Keith Casey. Are you a doctor, or is there a thing with the initial?
It's just my first initial. Some people call me doctor, and I usually correct them. One time I did correct people was at a Health 2.0 conference where I was introduced as Dr. Casey in front of 400 doctors, and I was like, oh, this is going to be good. But no, I tell people it stands for danger.
Okay, I just wasn't sure or not. Anyway, we have a couple of things we want to mention before we get into talking about the Clarify.io API. The first, I'm going to spotlight Michael, and he's going to put up a slide for AstraCon. Yes, AstraCon, October 13th to 15th in Orlando, Florida. Most everybody who's anybody in this business will probably make an appearance there, and it's your chance to hang out and talk to these people. I am old and I repeat myself a lot, so you've already heard me say what a great experience it is. All conferences are great. Let me just say that. Any one that you can get to, the most convenient one, when you've got all the people from the telephony world, the VoIP world, the WebRTC world, it's fantastic to meet everybody. And at some point, you have a chance maybe to meet Keith. In fact, there's one coming up. Keith, we're talking about TADHack Chicago. Actually, that's not that far away.
No, it's not even 6 weeks, maybe. It's getting pretty close.
So it's right after AstraCon, I think. Wait, or right before? What's the date on?
I think it's like 10 days before.
Right, it's early in. Boy, I should have prepared that slide. TADHack, our friend Alan Quayle, who runs that, does a terrific job. By the way, Tim Patton is with us, and he'll be at these things too, possibly Astra. He can't tell which direction. It's frozen. Yeah, join our Kiva group, vuc.me/Kiva. Michael's got a slide on that too. Michael's gone black. There it is. It looks to me like we've made something over 1,000 loans. vuc.me/Kiva. You're lending to people who are really hard-working entrepreneurs all over the world. You choose your country. I mean, if your folks are from Colombia, you can do that, or if you're someplace in Africa, Eastern Europe kinds of things. And there's even now, and you have to want United States loans. Okay, let's move on to Keith and to Clarify.io. Keith, as I told you earlier, we generally ask people how they got into technology. How did that happen for you?
Oh, geez, that's a pretty long, roundabout story. I just fell in love with technology when I was a kid. And I was the kid that my parents stopped buying me electronic toys because I would dismantle them, and you'd have like, little bitty pieces of just about everything laying about. So I would connect my transformers to the VCR to random things, and ended up with a number of good shocks to go along with it.
Okay, I seem to be having some problems here,
Nope.
and if I'm cutting in and out, Michael can, of course, take over.
Okay, let's
I'll go
see.
investigate.
All right, bandwidth begun. So tell us just generally about Clarity or Clarify, and why. If I say Clarity, it's because it's a product name I'm familiar with from a past career. So, Clarify. What was the impetus? First of all, what is it, and then how did it come to be?
So Clarify, we're an API that makes audio and video searchable, and we help you understand your media. So extracting keywords, figuring out topics, things along those lines on the audio layer. On the video layer, we're starting to do things like object recognition. We're starting to play with things like OCR and videos for like when a truck drives by, identifying the phone number on the side of the truck, things like that. And it sort of came about a sort of a variety of threads. My first job out of college was at the Library of Congress, answering the ultimate geek question of how much data is at the Library of Congress. And the big problem, this was, let's see, 2001, 2002, the big problem we ran into at that point was there wasn't a good way to organize it and sort of keep the information flowing, keep it shared, figure out who had what sort of stuff. So like that was, rewind 14 years ago, and that's the thing I was thinking about. Got heavily in the APIs. Our founders, I'm not actually a founder, I'm employee number one, they came from the telecom space related to banks. So if you ever talk to a bank, you should just assume that everything you say to them on the phone is being recorded. And the way they do things now is that it's not very well organized. They record these things, and then they randomly sample a portion of them, send those out for transcription, and then they come back potentially days later. So the bank usually can't tell you what's happening right now or what's happening very shortly. A little while ago, it's days delayed at times. So we figured out that this is something that people are interested in, of the sort of the automatic speech recognition along with keyword analysis and stuff like that. I got into it because the same problem I was dealing with 14 years ago is not solved, and decided to jump back into it. So we started in banking, working with various big companies, and then we said, well, wait a minute, this is probably more useful as an API because the media industry needs it, the telecom industry needs it, just about everybody needs it, so let's figure out how to do this sort of at scale.
Yeah, and so, I mean, it's sort of a lot of people do asset management. This I've encountered from the broadcast side of the world, where you have this legal obligation to hold on to everything you put on air, but nobody does anything that intelligently analyzes or adds value to that. Mm-hmm. And so, when you say you guys are an API, who are your target market? I mean, beyond banking. Who's actually using this, and who's using it in novel ways? Because I mean, there's sort of the obvious stuff, but then there's maybe the less obvious stuff.
Yeah, so the banking's the obvious one. Insurance companies use it very similarly to banking. We've got one insurance company that whenever your agent talks to you and about a claim or something, they watch it for keywords. So they record the call, and if you say things like lawyer, lawsuit, if you drop the F-bomb at them, they know that, and they like after the call, they look at the call and they say, oh, wait a minute, something's going wrong here. This person's talking about a funeral. We should probably listen to find out what's going on. So that's kind of closer to the banking thing. My hands down favorite use case so far was I was working with I'm based here in Austin, Texas, and University of Texas is big here. They've got a great computer science program. And I was meeting with a handful of computer science students a couple months ago, right before graduation. And they said, oh, we used Clarify to study for finals. I was like, oh, that's great. Like, you loaded up your lectures, you could find terms, and like, no, that's not what we did at all. Like, oh, okay, well, what'd you do? They took all the professor's lectures from the semester, loaded into the system, and searched for the phrase, on the exam. I was like, oh my God, you guys are brilliant. I bought the next round of drinks because I was like, regardless of how well you did, you deserve an A for laziness there. You generated live cliff notes of your entire semester. And that's something we didn't envision at all, but it's great that people are coming up with ways to be lazy at scale.
Wow. So this is, I mean, just adding value to all this media, because we've got tons of media. People got media they don't even realize, right?
Yeah.
For example, do you have any partners, any hardware partners, or anybody else in industry who's using you in conjunction with something else?
I don't think on the hardware front. On the software front, we've done a bunch of work with guys like Brightcove, the media player company. They're doing some great stuff. Let's see. I'm not involved on that side of things, so I know names. I'm just not allowed. I'm not sure which ones I'm allowed to name You know.
Okay. My tip for you then is you need to talk to Rakesh at Snapstream here in Houston,
Oh
because
yes.
they are, they're the guys. They started off as a consumer DVR outfit, but they're the
Hmm.
guys who enable people like The Daily Show to capture
Yeah.
all of the newscasts and pull off metadata, but they're not doing anything much in the analysis of the data, just
Hmm.
storing it in common searches. So.
Well, and we've played with some of their stuff before, and the way they work is they strip out the a lot of the closed captioning, because
Mhm.
the closed captioning that comes out is fantastic. So we do speech recognition though. So while they work predominantly with broadcast, things that are broadcast, whether it's movies or television, we can also work with things like radio. So little bit different approach, but it opens up a slightly different world.
Yeah, one form of on-ramp versus another. I mean,
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah.
you guys
They're
are
doing
adding
great
the
stuff.
intelligence. You guys are adding the intelligence overlay to whoever's got the media collected by whatever fashion. So
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And they're doing great stuff. I really love their product.
very cool. Randy, are you back, buddy? You're muted, friend.
No, my volume was down, but it's the
Oh, there we
effect
go.
is the same. I missed some of the parts of what Keith was saying, but I wanted to ask. Okay, we're familiar. In fact, Tim Pan is with us, and Tim was involved in at least one project that tried to mine intelligence from audio, things like indexing it, and I think we have a similar vein here. But I was curious looking at what Clarify.io does. By the way, let me repeat that the URL is clarify.io. If you want to go look, they've got some nice explanations there. But what about the video? I'm sorry if I missed it. You just tell me that you already mentioned it. But what is done with video? Because I can picture audio. What do you do with the
Hmm.
video?
So publicly, not a whole lot yet. We're starting to release some things from our lab where we can do object recognition in video. So we've got about 10,000 different objects that we can find, that we can say a truck entered the video on this frame. And so now you can jump to every instance of trucks. So we've got a great demo where you can find sharks in a documentary. And it's kind of fun because they don't say the word shark, it's a documentary. There's just these long pans of sharks swimming by, and we can identify those. And then from there, we're going to work on things like OCR on top of it. So when a truck drives through, we can give you the phone number of the truck in case you're doing, let's say hypothetically, a traffic analysis of who's driving by your house. You can find phone numbers of the companies going by.
Yeah, I'm laughing because most of you have probably seen, if you've been on the freeway for any length of time, the "How's my driving?" dial 800 FU. Anyway, right? All that
Yeah.
works. Um, that's interesting. And by the way, is the Shark demo available to the public somewhere on the
We're we're
website or
uh, we're hoping
YouTube?
to release public demo of that soon. We don't have a firm timeline on that. We're actually working on adding more languages first for the audio portion.
Okay, that'd be great. Audio is really important,
Okay,
but
we're
what you can do with video is more forward-looking.
okay.
We've
Apparently, either
seen,
either Google's having troubles, Randy, or
what Google's doing. Obviously, they're
okay, Randy. I'm going to step in now, buddy,
kind
because you're
of
frozen and
course,
your
they've got
bandwidth
these
has
scandals
bailed on you.
themselves. I'm gone.
You froze. Your video's gone and your bandwidth is bailed. You're packet deprived
Oh
and sounding
gosh.
like a Cylon, my friend. Um,
And
so
Max Headroom, I thought.
Yeah, I was going for
okay,
Max
okay,
Headroom.
okay. So before we started the call, we were talking about this little circumstance, and I'll lay it out again so that it can be recorded and go down in all history as something that people might find interesting, a novel use case. Texas Department of Transportation was doing some work on a highway not far from my house. And it got quite a few of the neighbors a little agitated because we had heavy truck traffic through the neighborhood for several days and damaging trees and causing all kinds of havoc. And someone from the city commented that, well, TxDOT does not play nice. Surprise, surprise. And they will quite often tell people just whatever it takes to get them off the phone. And what the city said was, if we had a traffic study that indicated what was going on during these periods of redirect, that would be a good argument to go forward and get TxDOT to amend their plans. And somebody said, oh yeah, well, we'll get some people out there, we'll take pictures and blah, blah, blah. And it turns out that if you look around the neighborhood, lots of folks, including us, have household security systems. And so it just occurred to me that we've got at any given moment 6 weeks worth of all of the traffic going in front of our house. So what could I do with Clarify IO in analyzing that video? How, I mean, is that an opportunity?
Yeah, I think that's a huge opportunity. We're working with some companies doing things along those lines quietly at this point, but we want to open it up. Right now, the object recognition, like the in video, is not publicly available, but we're working on making that more publicly available. We really want to sort of put it in front of people and get some feedback before we release it, because as with any API, once you release it, it's like a puppy. You have to take care of it now indefinitely. But yeah, so we're thinking along those lines to be able to say, okay, here's how many trucks drove by, here's how many cars. We could do things like, here's how many red trucks drove by eventually. We want to be able to track that sort of information because we think there's a huge opportunity in terms of sort of these passive data feeds that are going on, but then also like to answer serious questions, because if you have a convenience store, you've got a security camera pointed at the parking lot, you want to know, okay, well, what happened at this particular time? What vehicle was it that drove away at 1:03 in the morning when this happened inside the store?
Yeah, what I want to know is, how many vehicles are going past that are over 4 meters tall or something like that, right? Which would be anomalous for a residential street.
Yeah.
And I'd like to compare that against, the prior week or something like that. And all of a sudden, we have some meaningful insight into what's going on, as opposed to just some outraged people shaking their fists at a state regulator who doesn't care.
Yes. It's much easier making those arguments when you have hard data to point at, as opposed to just feelings and opinions.
Exactly. So, how long have you guys been doing this? How long has it been around, and how are you growing and such like?
Company's been around close to 2 years now. They actually the founders went through Techstars London, so they are London-based. After they graduated September 2013, they moved here to Austin, and I was working for Twilio at the time, so I helped them land here, and then a few months later left Twilio and then joined up with Clarify. And I've been on formally since about December 2013 or so. So we've been at it for a little while. There's 6 of us now, plus an intern, and the intern's fantastic. He's been lots of fun. And we're growing slowly, but we're getting sort of the right people in, sort of on board at this point.
Cool. Okay, Randy, how are we doing now?
I'm here, but I don't know how successfully or completely.
Forgive me, Tim. Tim, you had tipped me to something earlier this year about somebody who was doing some video analysis. Is this relative?
So that's Sighthound, probably.
Yes.
And they kind of come at this from the security angle. So looking for people and doors opening and that kind of thing. Although I don't know how generic their code is. I mean, it may be that it could be reapplied into this kind of space, or I'm ignorant as to how it works. I've just seen a cute demo. I'm curious to know how you've managed to get the voice recognition past the near monopoly of Nuance.
Well, we're not so worried about them because fundamentally, like most of the people we're working with, it's kind of the classic sort of innovator's dilemma. Nuance targets a very high-end part of the market, and they need a very high-quality thing. They focus a lot on the medical space. We're not worried about that space at all at this point. We really want to focus on sort of I hate this phrase, but the sort of democratization of the stuff. Bring it down, bring the cost point, the cost to get started down and the level of effort to get started down to the point where when people play with our API, we generally find that they get started in minutes. They integrate into their apps with us in like hours to days. We had one customer that they dropped us an email on Monday saying, hey, we're going to get started integrating. We're like, oh, great, that's fantastic. If you run any questions, let me know. And the next email we got from them was on Wednesday saying we're done. And that's bizarre. I mean, that's the kind of thing that you really don't have in most of these systems. I mean, if you're looking at... Sorry?
So that's more kind of the Twilio model where you've made the API sufficiently clear and concise that people can just get on with it, and they don't need a lot of hand-holding, hopefully, and can dive in. Yeah. Cool.
I actually wrote a blog post recently saying every API company has 3 user interfaces, and I said first there's the website, and everyone thinks about the website. We spend a lot of time thinking about UX and experience, and there's that sort of stuff there. Then there's the API, and a lot of people sort of slim down the API. They try and make it as clear and expressive as possible. And then I added the third one, and I said, and the documentation is just as important to all these others. Because when people hit your documentation, they're either getting started for the first time, so they want to know, what does it take to get started? They're either implementing a new feature, like integrating into their app, so they just want to get the job done. Or the third sort of scenario is, it's 2 in the morning and something broke. They want to know, how do I fix that? And sort of designing and building documentation to support those sorts of use cases.
Yeah, I mean, as you may know, I did worked a few years at Troppo, and we had the same sort of thing, and the prevalence of really simple examples in the sample code and stuff like that people could rip out and drop into their code and have something working immediately, and then kind of maybe refine it. And then sometimes you find that actually they need more help than is like something you can document, and then at that point they come and talk to the support guys and say, well, how do I actually get this extra feature going or whatever? But certainly the initial examples are incredibly important as far as we can see.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you need to get people.
I'm in a slightly noisy environment here, so I'm going to mute again, but it's not because I've gone away.
Yeah, you need to get people sort of up to the knee of the curve with the documentation that doesn't involve too much staff time, and then every opportunity beyond that is sort of further direction to refine the examples, have more advanced examples as you go forward. I think we see that in a lot of places. So who's your perfect customer? Who's center of your target market? I mean, beyond the obvious, right? I mean, because you said banks and insurance companies. That's good. There's lots of those.
Yes, absolutely.
That's low-hanging fruit.
Yep. So we've got sort of horizontal and vertical targets. I mean, horizontal, we could say the call center space. Call centers record 900 million hours of data every year. I mean, it's just a ridiculous pile of data. But from there, we're sort of targeted on the verticals. Like, we're working with a number of media companies, like name brands that are, the companies that you'd recognize on a day-to-day basis that have this massive media problem. They do, lots of films, lots of television. They're trying to figure out, how do I keep this stuff organized? So we spend a lot of time in LA. LA seems to be a great market for us. On the flip side, we're doing some work with advertising companies. They want to do things like find every time that their particular customer is mentioned or their competitors are mentioned on TV, on news, on whatever the case may be. They're already doing that for like Twitter and Facebook. We sort of add to that arsenal of that pool of data. So we spend a lot of time in New York. Those are kind of the places where they've been able to connect like revenue to like having better media sources and having better data sources. So it's sort of an easy case to sell them, hey, look, here's how you can do your job better, make more money, cut costs, whatever the case may be.
Have you thought about feeding that data through to somebody who does that kind of aggregation and analysis on Twitter and Facebook as a service? I'm thinking of people like DataSift and those sorts of companies.
Yeah, and there's companies along those lines, like Mass Relevance here in Austin. They're a really good example of some of the guys that are doing that sort of thing. Spreadfast, and one of the founders of a company that was acquired by Spreadfast is on our board. So we're talking with those guys to see, where things make sense and how we can sort of do interesting things for them. But we're exploring.
Yes, indeed. Wow.
So, Keith,
right,
are we going to see you at Astricon again this year?
Yes, I will be at Astricon. I will be speaking about Batman. The name of my the name of my presentation is Building Your API Utility Belt, and it came about because I was watching the first Michael Keaton Batman movie where Jack Nicholson was the Joker, And Batman bursts into the museum and saves Vicky Vale and pulls out this tool that sends spikes out, and he sort of repels out of the building. And Joker says, "Oh, where does he get such wonderful toys?" And I realized, as API developers, we don't have those wonderful toys, and we should probably find them or build them if we have to.
Well, that sounds good. It sounds like you could also do a Dangerous Demo again.
Yes, I've been pondering that.
Possibly even in costume.
In costume, what? As Batman? I'll think about that.
Why not? Get the bonus marks for a Batman outfit, I'll tell you.
I'll consider that one. Ben's not participating this year, correct? Other people have a chance?
Yeah, Ben is going to be judging. He's taking a year out because he's won it every time he's entered. So this year is his judging year, and he's not entering.
I can appreciate
and
that.
We've got, especially for Tim, we've got a new class of entry, a prize called the Swan Prize, which is aimed at people who do the most incredible technical things, but achieve everything with absolute ease and grace. It's just like a swan gliding across the top of a lake, but underneath there's all this stuff going on underneath, but you never see that.
And that's going to make this look easy.
Are you sure it's not going to be the Ugly Duckling Prize?
Well, you could be the Ugly Duckling as well. And we've got a special kind of sub-prize for everybody who crashes and burns, because just to encourage people to push the boat out just a little bit further, everybody who enters and crashes and burns will get a special customized prize this Astricon. And you're going to have to wait and find out what it is. But anyway, Keith, sorry, I've stolen your thunder there.
No.
And dragged you back onto Dangerous Demos, which is very naughty of me.
Consider me intrigued.
Brilliant.
So am I right in thinking that the API is something I could feed WAV files to, or is it zip, or how do I send my data to you?
So
audio-wise.
We don't work with live feeds right now. We work exclusively with recordings. But you could take WAV, MP3, MOV, M4A, just about anything. We handle, I think it's like 27 different file types or something. All the big ones that you can think of, most likely, AIFF, that sort of thing. You feed it in, you make a HTTP post to us, give us a URL to the file, we download it, do all of our processing, and then we do a callback when it's ready. And then from there, you can do searches via one API request. You can extract the top 20 keywords. We're starting to do topics. So like keywords are things you say. Topics are what you're talking about. So if your keywords were Austin, Dallas, and Houston, your topics are cities in Texas. Even if you never say the word Texas, we can figure that out.
Okay, so the use case that I think Randy alluded to earlier, that the guys I worked with ages ago, where they were doing a thing where you take a conference call and you record every utterance. So when I stop speaking, it makes a snippet recording and then files it away. And then nice things happen that you can go through that conference, listen to it later, comment on it, whatever. And they played with various transcription APIs to try and get some kind of automated sense of what was in the conference.
Yes.
There's a party kicking off around me, so and beer is being drunk, so I'm behind the scenes there. But so what I'm curious about is whether there's anything that your API could bring to them in terms of understanding the content, not necessarily transcribing it, but finding things like the boss gave an action point here, or I agreed to fix this issue, or so kind of hot word type thing maybe.
Yeah, so we're already experimenting with a couple things of like automatic question detection, because when somebody asks a question like you just did, one person says something, the other person starts a phrase, they start uttering something. There's usually a transition back to the first person, and usually that second person, the utterance begins with who, what, why, where, when, that sort of thing, to be able to detect those things. So we're playing with ideas of being able to say, show me all the questions that were asked during this conference call. We're not entirely sure how it's going to work, but it's a really interesting scenario we're playing with. But actually, our language scientist, one of his PhDs, he did automated call summarization to be able to, entirely in an automated fashion, being able to extract what's said in the call and then say, here's the general gist of what went on during this call. So that's another area that we're playing with. We're a small team, so we play with things for a while and then try and get them out to the real world to play with, for other people to play with them.
This really is a fascinating field, and I thought it would be of great interest to everybody. And having experienced you on one of the other, I think that was that the TADHack thing, or what was your participation? I think it was for that, or
it was the Astrocon one about maybe 4 or 5 weeks ago.
Oh, that's right. That's right. So yeah, and you briefly mentioned the Batman thing, and I know that you, while I was having trouble reconnecting, you went over that again. I'd like to ask if there's any questions. I'll switch over and take a look on IRC, and if anybody's on ZipDX or anyone who's, what are they holding up, a bottle there? Anyone has any questions, go ahead. I'm looking on IRC right now. I don't see anything there. Oh, that's just good to see you on Twitter. I'm asking this laptop to do a lot of things right now, and hopefully my connection's better. I don't know, does it seem better? Anybody want to vote on that?
Yeah, it does seem better.
Okay, I'll measure it in shortly.
Yes,
I'm just trying to think of if people can think of the good uses for this. My favorite use would be if we could analyze some of I mean, we've only got 554 files, so, and they're about 1 hour long.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we could pick one. And how long are the audio files that you would be analyzing normally? Because obviously an hour is a long, long time.
Mm-hmm.
Not so much for a meeting, I suppose. There are meetings that go on forever. And by the way, here's an idea for you. I'm free spitballing now. Could you take a 4-hour meeting, analyze it, and cut all the crap out of it down to the essentials? I think that eventually you'll get that good. What do you think?
I think that's entirely possible. My concern on that is what happens when you cut out all the crap and it turns into a zero-length meeting.
Yeah, zero-length file, right?
I mean, we'll have some. There's some people that are going to lose their jobs over that one, but no, we've been playing with that sort of thing of being able to say identify like who the sort of based on who speaks and how much and who gets interrupted to sort of identify like a sort of org chart from the meeting. Of, okay, this person was obviously leading the meeting, even if you never tell us that, to be able to detect that. Here are the people who were defensive during the call. We're working with sentiment analysis already. We want to do motion detection to be able to say, you know, here's what's going on. Here's a little bit of the subtext.
That's really interesting. By the way,
yeah, did you just say you're doing emotional detection as well now?
Yes.
I missed that bit.
Yeah, so we're not sharing that publicly yet, but I was actually working on a prototype of that a couple weeks ago. That's starting to work. My favorite thing though, like the sort of holy grail in this space, is sarcasm, because if you just do like speech recognition, you've got like text of the call. Sarcasm is it's hard to detect. So you know, Randy, if I say that's a great idea, or I say Randy, that's a great idea, the text is exactly the same, but it's the tone, it's the volume, it's how I deliver it that makes all the world of difference.
That is a tough nut to crack, though, because it's true. Yeah, that's a great idea. It's just like, well, how's that working for you? You know, that people say. Mm-hmm. That's a sarcastic comment. How's that working out for you? You know, and so having the text being read neutrally, you wouldn't get the significance. That's an interesting point. Sure.
Yeah, and you can think, wow, this person's being really constructive and helpful, and no, they're not at all.
Right, exactly. And by the way, what you just said implies that you have either perfect or close to perfect synchronization, which on, for example, our YouTube recordings, you wouldn't have. If you're using the visual as well, that's going to be a problem. You'd have to detect that, and you can correct it, of course, but you'd have to detect it first.
Yes.
You know, lips with the movement and the audio and. That's a lot of CPU cycles.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and it's stuff that luckily we're not having to come up with all this stuff. There are a number of labs around the world that are doing some great work, some cutting edge stuff. Some of it is frankly, the scientists come up with these ideas, and they're like, here's a big notion. And they implement something that's really cool and powerful, but then they don't know what to do with it. And so our CEO, Paul Murphy, has been sort of scouring the world's labs, finding those sorts of things, and figuring out how to utilize some of those.
As often as not, the scientists implement it in MATLAB, and it won't do anything like real time. So you could get through an hour's audio in a week or so. And,
Yes.
But then, it's probably enough to know if it's interesting.
Yeah, and one of the things I found, I didn't realize this, but we use Python a lot in our backend, and NumPy and SciPy, which are two of the big mathematical packages in the Python space, behind the scenes are Fortran. They've been so optimized to do the Fourier transforms and all the big math that's what they are. So we actually have Fortran in our stack. So I figured there might be some people that appreciate that one.
That's funny. I used to do programming of very low-level systems, and the ROMs had Fortran advanced mathematical functions built in. I mean, they were assembled already, or whatever. They were compiled.
Yeah.
They came from Fortran, and so if you needed to do I wish I could think of like hysteresis loss. If you were trying to do a calculation like that on a very, simple microprocessor setup, a Z80, you called these things. So that's almost my only relation to Fortran. But there's obviously lots of powerful stuff that Fortran libraries were capable of doing, and a lot of people compiled them into assembly.
Yeah, and we don't write Fortran by any stretch of the imagination, but just the sheer amount of Fortran that's been optimized for this sort of thing is fantastic. It's been educational.
So the other thing that strikes me, is a lot of this stuff is starting to leak into the browser. Things like motion detection and image object detection in images, and to a limited extent, speech recognition as well. I'm wondering whether that's a space you want to pursue or you want to run away from because it's hard to monetize.
So actually, Google Chrome has done a lot in that space. So they silently downloaded a thing a while ago that basically always listens for you to say, Google, do this. It's a space that we've looked at. The problem is the math is fundamentally different. So because we work with recordings, we've got the entire data stream right there. So when we're trying to figure out word number 2, our algorithms look at word number 3 and word number 1 to better inform us what word number 2 is. When you're working with a live data stream, like whether it's a live SIP call or a plugin in the browser, when you're looking at word 2, you don't necessarily have word number 3 yet. So the math is a lot more complex, and you end up with a little bit less data. Luckily, in a lot of those cases, if you're talking like Siri or Cortana or Amazon's Echo, you're working with a very small, limited vocabulary, so it's a lot easier to do that. We're working with the world's vocabulary, so it offers some different challenges that we're not interested in approaching immediately, but there's some possibilities there.
I mean, I'm sounding a bit like a broken record because I keep saying this for everywhere I go at the moment, but you really need to take a look at web audio, because you can actually you can do things like short length recordings, and then you can, cute thing is you can push that recording out into a web worker and run it there. So it doesn't have to be done real time hard now. It could be something you could feed back a few seconds later into as a callback. So there's some quite interesting kind of, not exactly asynchronous, but like loose synchronization that you can start to do in the browser by those kinds of methods. I did a little experiment for doing trying to detect latency shifts in over real-time calls, but it's quite fun that you can do that kind of analysis actually in JavaScript.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, but apparently there's even the C compiler that targets JavaScript now. The Clang VM will target a subset of JavaScript, which is just crazy, but cool.
Hang on, how does that work? A C compiler that generates JavaScript. Isn't that backwards?
Well, no. So it's basically using the JavaScript engine as a virtual machine. and it's using what the strategy. You look it up. I haven't played it myself, but thing to look up is ASM.js, and it's basically it's a subset of JavaScript which is guaranteed to be decently performant. And then there's a compiler backend that generates this stuff. And then, of course, when you feed it into the, say, V8 interpreter, it then goes off and does stuff with it and runs it as native code in the end. So it's like a intermediate language. It's like almost like a package rather than a
pseudocode. Yeah.
Yeah, right, exactly.
P code, yeah.
We've strayed off your topic here, Keith. I'm sorry, I diverted us.
Oh no, I'm super interested in the math and the technology behind this. So I think that's like one of the cool stories about what the industry is doing and like what we're doing. So I'm happy to go as deep as you guys want.
I think you've reached the bottom of my knowledge there.
All right.
Yeah, and I'm not one for great depth. Not being a coder, I can look at things and see how I might want to use them, but I usually have to have somebody use them on my behalf. So we do have experience within ZipDX of doing transcription, real-time transcription of voice, and as you say, yes, the near Nuance certainly has a command of the space, but that doesn't mean they're the only ones.
No, not at all. So I think there's still a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, Randy, anything more, buddy?
Not so much from me. I think this is a fascinating field, and I'm looking forward to watching it. And we'll have to figure out if I can find something that's got a lot of dense information in it. Maybe we can work out sending you, I don't know, 10 minutes or something just to play around with it. I'd be very interested to see. And it would be a good demo. I mean, some of our sessions have 10 or 15 minutes of straight, very condensed information. And if we can find something appropriate, I'll talk to you about that. Maybe we can do a test.
Yeah, well, I was thinking based on what we have, we could take basically any of the random videos, anywhere in the collection, sort of extract keywords. So if you want to know every time somebody talked about Astrakhan, we could find that across your entire collection and sort of see how the discussions of it have gone over the years. I think that could be really interesting.
Oh yeah. In fact, one of the last things I wanted to mention was that kind of analysis, which is not that advanced, right? I mean, you're recognizing speech and getting the data together. Keywords that are distinct. It's just like when you're trying to do a Google search. You need something distinct, but once it is, like Astrakhan, like Clucon, like Tad Hack, and so on, but also for political use, political parties could take the town hall meeting where they don't know what's going to happen. Forget the speeches. That's all written down and everybody knows, and it's all extremely artificially contrived anyway. But how about the declarations of the people who are participating? Just take those, and they're often audio, right? Yeah. So you record those, put them together, and have some clever political analysis that says, well, here's the real issues, and there's, we heard this word a number of times. We heard this word. I mean, they're already doing it, but they're probably doing it by hand. So
well,
that's a big area.
A lot of them are tracking Twitter and Facebook, and they're not looking at sort of things at scale. And I envision a time, I'm talking with a couple candidate staffs to try and get this out there, but I think it'd be really cool to be able to say, here's every time this topic, immigration came up last week, and here's who mentioned it in a positive light, and here's who mentioned it negatively. And here's a little bit of context of what they said around it. I think that could be really interesting for informing the next conversation, the next debate, or the next interview, whatever that is.
Absolutely. And this is a perfect example of where do we go from monitoring all these social streams, because anybody can do that. The next step is to listen to what people are actually saying. You can also use like phone-in shows, stuff like that. Take all that and listen to it and say, okay, in this region, such and such happened. There's a million things that come to mind immediately. Tim has something he wants to say?
Well, yeah, actually related. How likely is it that we could persuade you to analyze the output of an entire one-day conference? I'm speaking at the Cranky Geek in San Francisco in September, and the WebRTC kind of summary day thing. It'd be really fun to have those videos analyzed and time-stamped or something.
Yeah, yeah, I think that would be, it's almost trivial to do. I'd love to be able to see, like every time, WebRTC comes up, what the words are around it, what the keywords are, people who say things in a positive or negative way, I think that'd be really cool to look at. We've talked with a couple conferences, like a lot of conferences record their keynotes, so we've been looking at that, but like nothing at a full day's scale, and that's just because we haven't gotten around to it yet.
Okay, well, I might mention it to the organisers, and if the logistics work out and it seems possible for you, we might try and pull that off. It'd be fun to do, and I know they video it anyway, so seems no reason why not to attempt it from that point of view.
Yeah, happy to lend a hand with that, whatever you need.
Okay, speaking of all this stuff, TADHack has updated their site, so if you go to tadhack.com, one of the hardest to pronounce conference names around these days, but it is TADHack, TADHACK.com. They have the one that Keith mentioned. My volume was low, sorry. They have the one that Keith mentions that's coming up in October. There's another one in, is it Lisbon? In November, and then Paris in December. And I am going to be, if there is a Paris in December 12th and 13th, I will definitely be there. And supposedly, I'll have my band with me and we'll be playing. That depends on the venue, but that will be a good one. James, what do you have to say for yourself?
Well, we're missing you here. You should be here.
Oh, I wish I could.
So you're going to be there in Paris if you don't go on vacation again.
Well, warm up the Concorde and I'll come over to the hack farm or whatever you call it.
Look what I've got.
Yes. Sipsmith.
I have lots of this.
I remember that last
cocktail.
year.
Oh, you do? Well, we've managed to get ourselves sponsored by Sipsmith.
I think that's fantastic. That's the way to
so
go.
not only have we got that, but we've got a whole of this stuff. Zoa bought this from Bulgaria. Apparently, this is rocket fuel. So we got 2 live bands that are going to be performing here. And over behind me, you can probably see this going on behind me. This is Sam. Give us a wave, Sam. There we go. Sam is building our own private mobile system here at the farm. So, all exciting stuff. But anyway, just don't let me disturb you again. And Tim, up there, I don't know where you are, Tim. London, it looks like, or where up in the frozen north.
Manchester.
We're expecting you to come down either Saturday or Sunday and bring your Open BTSL with you. We'll pick you up at the airport.
Have you seen the price?
Really.
Have you seen the price of flights?
Well, EasyJet, they're very cheap.
I see a sponsorship opportunity.
Anyway,
there is no EasyJet from Liverpool to Gatwick.
Well, come on the train then. Stop pontificating. Get yourself down here. That's an.
I think it's time to move to the mature audiences version. So I'm going to thank Keith.
Yeah.
It's good to have you as always, and please
Before
come
Keith
back.
goes, I think the emotional analysis stuff could be real dynamite, and I will be looking forward to having a chat with you in Orlando about that and working out what we can do to demonstrate that. So hopefully you'll have it ready and working by then.
I will make sure to get you early access if it's not publicly available.
Excellent.
All right.
We will be there.
Okay, thank you for that addendum, James, because that allows me to thank Keith again without being interrupted. Thanks, Keith. Come back anytime for any reason. Clarify, of course, but also join us for other topics. We do a lot of stuff that I think touches on your work.
Fantastic. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, and thanks to everybody. Thanks to all of you for your support. We really, 8 years of this, I'm still not tired of it. I'm tired of getting up at 9 o'clock, having to be ready at 9 o'clock. That means getting up at 7 when I'm out here, but that's only a few times. So we'll see you next week. I believe it's Polycom's turn, Michael, right? Muted. Well,
That's right. They'll be talking about their newly rolled out web suite, WebRTC based access to their Real Presence suite.
We're going to have to do a serious search to find out a guest, find a guest who has nothing to do with WebRTC. That's your homework assignment, everybody. Find a company who's in communications in real time who is not using WebRTC, and we'll grill them on why. That's it for this week. Everybody take care.